Welcome back to another episode of Loki. We're doing Season 2, Episode 2. The episode came out last week, and Episode 3 should be coming out tomorrow, but I didn't have much time to record this one earlier, so I'm recording it now, though I did watch it earlier. I've already done one watch through of the episode, and now I'll be watching it through again and commenting as I watch it. And again, I won't have any of the audio or the video from the episode in this podcast. You will just be hearing my voice and my thoughts as I'm watching it, and I'll probably pause in between and give some other thoughts that I may have had when I first watched it, or as I'm watching it now, anything I may catch. And again, I don't have any comic book background for this character or for pretty much any character. So this will just be based on Marvel in general, all of the movies, all of the TV shows that I've seen, and the previous season of Loki, and the previous episode of this season of Loki. And I'll probably keep trying to predict as we go where I see this going. I haven't seen episode 3 or 4. I know some people have. The people who get those early screenings of the show, of various shows, and those people, I believe, I'm pretty sure, that they've gotten episode 1 to 4, and some of them have only gotten episode 1 and 2. So I have no idea what episode 3, 4, or beyond holds. I haven't looked at any spoilers online. I'm sure there are plenty. And I haven't looked at any discussion for episode 1 or 2. I probably should at some point, but I probably want to do that after the entire series have come out, and then I might go back and look at discussions and ideas that happened when episode 1 released, when episode 2 released, and so on. And if I think about anything or think it's interesting, I might make another episode, a podcast episode, going over my thoughts. I'm still kind of hoping that the series doesn't end with season 2, and there might even be a season 3. I do kind of like the format of Marvel doing TV show episodes instead of movies. It almost feels like for movies, they take on a little bit too much, and sometimes a lot of the things that would have been nice to be shown in the movie that may have just only been implied, or you find out later that it was cut, and then you get like an extended cut of the movie, or you get like director commentary, or you get like extra little bits that come out sometime later that show all the stuff that they had to cut or talk about the stuff that they had to cut. And it almost seems like if you have a TV show, you're a bit more free to do a lot more with the characters and build a lot more and go more in depth. And it gives the audience time, I think, to become familiar with the characters and grow to like the characters. Now, if the TV show isn't written too well, that won't happen, obviously. And if the movie is written really well, it can happen within the span of a movie. But I find that happening more often when you have not only a really good movie, but also there's going to be a sequel, or like it's going to be 3 movies or 4 movies, or with Marvel, how they built it in. It's like an entire saga of movies. So I think for certain characters that they know won't have too much screen time on the big screen, having them in a TV show before introducing them possibly to a bigger role on in a movie, that might be a good thing to do. I don't know. I don't entirely know how it's ever been translated if a TV show has become popular enough and if the characters have become loved enough for it to make a movie, and you have the same actors from the TV show playing their same roles in the movie, instead of it being like a direct-to-TV movie or something like that, being like a more big-budget Hollywood-style movie. if that has ever been done. Probably have to look into that and see. And how that's been received, if it's actually been received well or not. But I also know there's an issue of TV writers versus movie writers, and sometimes the translation doesn't work too well. If you get the same writers and directors for a TV show and have them try to make a movie, it doesn't always go that good. And you could kind of see that they have more of the TV show mentality when going into making a movie. Whereas I think that may be incorrect in some cases, where you would want somebody who kind of understands the limitations of movies and what can and can't be covered in the time and the pacing. Because for movies, like the pacing almost is everything. It's important to have the writing be really well done. It's important to have the acting being really well done and the music to some degree having that really well done and flow with the movie. But I think a lot of the times where movies may fall short is in the pacing and the character development, and the time limit that they kind of have doesn't seem enough for a lot of movies that I've seen, where I feel like either they know that and they'll be planning a sequel, which I don't think is necessarily the right approach, or sometimes they don't realize that and they end up having to cut a bit too much, in my opinion, and then it just makes the movie not fit together as well as it could have if you kept some of those things in. And it almost seems like the movie kind of jumps from like one thing to another thing, or you almost sometimes see in some movies where there's almost a dropped plot, or you expected more to come of this little thing here or there, and then it doesn't do anything or make anything, and you're like, oh well, is that going to be resolved in a sequel? Is it actually going to go anywhere? So those are kind of my thoughts on movies versus TV shows, but I really like how you take a side character like Loki and build a TV show around them, and you do it well enough, and it's just made such a huge impact on me personally. And I know a lot of people, especially when Loki season 2 was coming out, there was a lot of online discussion which I had to completely ignore and make sure I wasn't spoiled for any of that. But I know there was a lot of hype around that, and I also know there was quite a lot of hype around Secret Invasion as well. But then, as I was watching it and as I was seeing the online discussion, episode after episode, a lot more people kept being more and more disappointed. And I was also one of those people, although I tend to look at the brighter side of things and find things that I like about a TV show. But this one didn't have much. And every single week as episodes came out, I kept expecting things that just never happened and expecting it to kind of change, and it didn't. And expected things to kind of be more answered and more flushed out, and it just seemed like none of that happened for that series. But for something like WandaVision, it was like amazing the entire series. For something like Loki, it was amazing the entire series. I did like the What If series. I liked that it was both episodic and it was continuous, where it told a storyline that kind of threaded through each of the episodes. I know some people didn't like that aspect of it and rather it be more episodic and have episodes be kind of standalone and not have to do with one another, not weaving this plot through each of the episodes, culminating in the final episode where all of the things come together. I kind of like that. I understand why people didn't like that. I can see both sides of that one. But I liked, on the one hand, the having it animated is a whole nother dimension to movies and TV shows, where on the one hand you have it being more kind of free and you're able to do a lot more with animation. And if you had real people, there would be a whole lot more CGI if you wanted to do all those same things. There would be, I think it would be more expensive in the end, if I'm not mistaken, having it be done as a live action versus having it be done as an animated series. But the What If series, when it first was announced, I was like, this is such an amazing idea for a series because you have all of this comic book stuff that never makes it into a movie or a TV show and just remains as comic book stories. and storylines, and you could just take bits and pieces of this and be like, well, here's this story and here's that story. But you could also just take bits and pieces of movies and be like, well, what if something completely different happened? And it's such an amazing and a brilliant idea, and I hope they continue it. And I know there's going to be a season 2. It's not going to be part of the MCU, but that's fine. But I still think it's such a good idea that it should be a series that kind of gets like a season 3, a season 4, etc. Just to fully play and imagine all of these scenarios and ideas. Because I think it's just fun. And it's just a fun thing to do. A fun series idea, a fun thing for the fans to just get something like that. It's like, what if this happened instead of this? You saw this outcome in the movie. What if something completely different happened? And they could go, like, what if just this one slight thing was changed? Or they could just go completely off the rails and be like, well, what if zombies is a good example of that one. Where it's like something completely foreign to any of the movies or anything. It's just, what if zombies existed and there's this zombie virus spreading through everything? So I think it's just really clever. But for Loki Season 2, let's get back to that before we wander off in some random other direction, as I tend to do. Season 2, Episode 2, in my opinion, is so far one of the best Loki episodes I have seen, including all of the Season 1 stuff. I think so far this one had a lot more, and it just fully captivated me and held on until the episode end. And I think I'll speak more to this as I watch, but I think out of all the episodes, season 1 and 2 so far, this one's been my favorite. And it almost seems like they just one-upped episode 1 in episode 2. And I'm hoping that the same thing will happen in episode 3. I absolutely can't wait. It's coming out tomorrow, and I'm probably not even going to watch it tomorrow, but we will see. If I do watch it tomorrow, hopefully on the weekend I'll be able to do this podcast episode and see where that goes. But I will start episode 2 of season 2 of Loki, and it's 49 minutes 18 seconds according to this. And hopefully you've all watched it, if anybody even watches these videos or gets this far. Let me begin. So as always, it starts with a recap of the previous episode, and it highlights the important things that you need to know for this episode, where they talk about Sylvie, they talk about the temporal loop, and of course people with lives on those branches, and every single one of them are variants. Changes everything, this changes nothing. Very interesting and different thoughts on everything, and beliefs. And of course, we get to see Ravonna again. The same thing from season 1. She's still MIA. We still don't know where she is or what she's doing, but they reiterated that one again in the intro. And of course, if you've watched this episode, you know it's important for this particular episode. I'll skip ahead just a little bit. So we actually start the episode. And they're in London, 1977, on the Sacred Timeline this time. And it's really good that they're showing whether we're on the Sacred Timeline or on one of the branches that branched off of the Sacred Timeline. And Loki and Mobius looking absolutely stunning. They only have this lead to Sylvie, where X5, I believe. They've tracked him down, and we're at a theater. It's weird that Mobius mentions he might be undercover, because I don't think we've seen, in all of Season 1, somebody from the TVA being quote-unquote undercover on a mission of any sort. But I assume that that is a possibility that they can do as long as they don't disrupt anything or make too great a change. Then they could blend in, almost like in DC Legends of Tomorrow, where they fully do time travel in that show, and you just dress in period piece costumes to blend in with the locals, and you make sure that history happens the way it's supposed to happen, and any major changes are stopped. So I'm guessing in some cases they don't have to prune entire timelines, and maybe there's a majority of the TVA that just does undercover work and goes into the sacred timeline whenever there's something that could be a disruption and deal with it quietly and never having to use those charges to, disintegrate or teleport the entire branch. And they could just, hop in, grab maybe a variant if they need to, or just fix whatever little thing might have occurred. So that's an interesting little thing that is mentioned here. And I kinda wish, looking back, that season 1 may have had something like that. I'm hoping that season 2 kinda has more of that, but I'm guessing it won't. I honestly don't think there's enough time in season 2. Like, if the season was 24 episodes, I could see them delving more into that kind of stuff. But it only being how many episodes? Like 6 episodes? I don't see that happening. I don't see I really wish I could see, but I don't see them doing that kind of thing where they're hopping into other times or even to other planets at other times. And of course, you have all these different branches and doing missions of any sort. It would have been cooler if we get to see them dressing up in various period pieces, going across the sacred timeline or the branch timelines, and having to blend in. But I'm thinking there's only going to be limited situations where they do that. This is one of them. And let me continue the episode from here. And he's clearly an actor here. And I always find it interesting when you have an actor playing a character playing an actor. But, I mean, it's just acting as if you're, a famous actor. It's almost always just like that. You figure out what type of actor you need to act as, and then you basically act as that person. As that type of person. And I'm sure you could just look at real life, actual celebrities and be like, okay, I'll need to act like this person. Or that person, etc. And of course he runs away. Which I find kind of strange that he does that. And B-15 is right in the back alley, ready to grab him in case he ran away. Only managed to grab his tempad. But it is weird that he decides to run here. It's like, what is he running from? If anything, Mobius and Loki, he should know, are probably the most reasonable people in the TVA. And we're the ones advocating for people to know about their original place in the sacred timeline or in whatever branch they had existed in. And where, if they had an original family, if they had lives back on the timeline. So it's odd that he would be running from them, but I kind of get it. Because he probably knows that they're going to interrogate him. During this point, the only thing I was thinking was, when I had watched it originally just a few days ago, was he probably knows something and is still part of some plan that's happening right now. And I'm like, And this is really cool in this scene at like 5, 6 minutes in, where Loki has created all of these illusion people. I don't know if all of them are fake, but we know when he grabs a pipe and he tries to swing at one of them, this one clearly is a Loki illusion. And just meant to, stop him or slow him down so that the actual Loki can catch up. And another one of Loki's actual moves to be able to fling something from somebody's hand, kind of like, almost like using the Force from Star Wars. And then this cool scene from the trailer where there's 3 Lokis. He's backed into a corner. The shadows have the classic Loki horns. And this is really interesting, his shadow ability to hold somebody down with his shadows. Mobius comes in. A little bit over the top, all that shadow play. And the actual Loki isn't the one in the middle, it's the one off to the right side. I don't know if that matters at all, to be fair. It could just be a tactical move because, if anything, they'd probably assume the middle one is the actual Loki and attack that one, so him off to the side makes more sense. But let me pause here. Another interesting scenario where we get to see more of Loki's moves and him actually using his powers more freely. We didn't get to see a lot of that in season 1. And I'm glad that they're showing off more of that in season 2. And even in the movies, we don't really get to see a lot of his actual powers. He was using, I believe, one of the Infinity Stones at that time. So it almost seems like he didn't really use much of his powers. At least in the Avengers movie. And then in the other movies, I don't recall us seeing him use his powers all that much either. I might have to rewatch some of the movies, the Thor movies, to remember if he actually does. But from what I remember, I don't think he does all that too much. And at least here, we get to see him show off a little bit more, use more of his powers. So I kind of like that. It was short. It was a short chase scene. So we didn't get to see too much. But I still liked that it was shown. And of course, we come back to the TVA. They've arrested X5. And they're taking him to interrogation. And I won't spoil the rest of the episode yet, but I could say a few things, and I'm not gonna. But it's hard to tell from a lot of these scenes where some of these other TVA agents stand, like what their beliefs might be, whose side they might be on, because clearly there are sides now. But I'm guessing all the ones that went with that, I forget their name now, but with the person from the previous episode taking all of the detonators to destroy timelines and all of the weaponry. It looks like at that time, those were the agents that were identified as the ones that would be willing to go to those extremes and follow that person. And all the other agents that were left behind were either not needed or were likely not going to be willing to follow that individual and carry out those plans. And of course, one of the main agents, he ended up just being an actor on the Sacred Timeline doing his own thing. And we'll see later on in the episode why. Or at least I think we'll kind of see why. Anyways, Loki and Mobius. Back to Obi. Obi's busy with some machine sitting on the floor. I really like his style. Just on the floor, everything spread out in front of him. Doing his work. It's literally his man cave. This is quite literally his man cave. And I absolutely, it's amazing. I wish I had one of these. Not necessarily with as much stuff, but if it were me, all those shelves in the background would just be loaded with video games. And Obi's continuously working on the solution to the branching timelines. It looks like, and I talked about this at the end of the previous episode, or after the end, because I completely forgot to talk about it, but it seemed like from one discussion I saw online, or a part of a discussion, that some people believe Obi might be a bad guy. And I can kind of see where they're getting that from, but also it seems weird that he he almost seems like, not only in this scene but in the previous episode, he's working really hard to do all of the right things, and he doesn't seem as suspicious or like he's trying to stall them or he's trying to undo anything. It doesn't seem like, even though he probably may believe that, well, all we have to do is make it back into one sacred timeline and all our problems will be solved. He's not suggesting that as an answer. He's trying to change the machine to be able to handle multiple timelines. And he seems to have the technical know how to do that. And he is working on that. He's actively working on a solution so that the multiverse can exist. So I still don't think that he's necessarily a bad guy or suspicious or anything like that. Not yet, anyways. There isn't enough for me to be convinced of that. And then B-15 going over to Casey, and they're looking for Renslayer. And I like how in the background you just see the branches of the Sacred Timeline. The Sacred Timeline's all wobbly, not like a straight line anymore. And it's just tons and tons of branches. It's funny that it's still blinking, the two red lines on it. And he's saying that Miss Minutes is down, which is interesting. I think it's clear that Miss Minutes is gone with either Renslayer or with somebody else, or just gone off on its own. I'm saying it, though I'm pretty sure it identifies as female. I still don't know what it is, though. I had seen some discussion online being like, when the Kevin was introduced in She-Hulk, that it seems to be like a projection thing. And what if Miss Minutes is literally being projected by some kind of projector? And that's what that thing is? And both Kevin and this Miss Minutes projector, assuming they're separate things, they could be the same thing, were built by He Who Remains? I do like that idea. It's just, I don't know if that's gonna be a thing. It looks almost like Miss Minutes is its own thing. Almost like how Across the Spider-Verse had their computer system that almost seemed like it was a sentient AI type thing. I'm guessing Miss Minutes is going to be something similar. Unless Miss Minutes is actually a living thing that is just like that. But I guess we will see, maybe, in a future episode. And now such an amazing scene at 10 minutes in. You have Loki and Mobius both sitting down together, trying to figure out what the Tempad does. Mobius reading the book, the instruction manual, and Loki physically messing with the actual device. And it's such an amazing interaction, honestly. Them both trying to work it out, one reading the instructions, the other one trying to figure out the electronics, where the wires go, trying to figure out what it's doing. It's absolutely brilliant. And it actually shows that they work together really well. Even though they're not able to communicate and figure it out, the fact that they've gotten as far as they probably have with sitting down and one of them reading the instructions and the other one physically tinkering with the device. The fact that they're just able to do that instead of it being like, the book and the devices with one of them trying to figure out and tinker with it while the other one kind of hovers or while the other one is doing something else kind of shows that they have really good communication and teamwork. And it's clear that for Mobius, reading and trying to figure out those instructions is just not his thing. It's too much technical jargon probably, and he wasn't trained to do that. And clearly for Loki, even though he's clearly trying his best to figure out what's going on, and he has some knowledge and understanding, it's probably not his forte either to be messing with these electronics and figuring out what's going on. So, but the fact that they're able to calmly sit down and do this, I think shows a really good what's the word? Really good teamwork and communication skills and ability to work with one another. And then, of course, B-15 and Casey comes in, and Casey says, Miss Minutes is working with Renslayer. Now, I kind of think that this should have been somewhat obvious, but I understand where they may not have seen this coming. Because Loki seems like, oh, some pieces clicked together. As he's saying, when he was in the past, he heard He Who Remains and Renslayer talking with one another. So, from our point of view, and I'm not sure if Loki or Mobius, B-15, or Casey put any of this together, but from our point of view, we clearly know that Renslayer doesn't seem to have... I don't know if it's too clear, but it seemed like from her reaction in Season 1, she didn't have memories of knowing the person behind the curtains, He Who Remains. So, like I had said when I had done episodes on Season 1, it seems like her memory was just erased, like everybody else. Where at one point, probably everybody knew that He Who Remains, or Kang, was the one in charge. And then he had to, for some reason, wipe all of that away and put in place the 3 timekeepers and say, oh, they're actually the ones in charge, and wipe all memory of him from all their minds, including very likely Renslayer, even though from those recordings in the previous episode, which I had mentioned in the previous episode of this podcast, that he was clearly working with her quite closely to achieve the things that he did. So something must have happened for him to have wiped her memory and put her in a position of being just a regular agent, and then eventually she worked her way up or was promoted to being a judge. But I guess maybe later on in this season we'll find out what actually happened to her and what their relationship was and what happened between the two of them and why she was, I guess, demoted in some way, unless she chose that, unless she wanted that. Maybe she didn't want, when he was deciding to wipe everybody's memories and put in place these 3 timekeepers, he didn't want anybody to know, but he was like, okay, you can still know, because, we worked together all this time. But then she might be like, well, I can't do my job effectively or hide this from people, I'm bad at lying, or something like that. It's believable. And then from that, he's like, okay, well, I could wipe your memory too, but that will mean you'll forget about our entire history and past and everything. And then she would have probably been like, that's perfectly fine. Then he's like, well, I could put you in a high position, so you have authority. But then she might be like, well, that's kind of suspicious, you can't do that, because they might trigger a memory or something like that. Because I'm sure all of them know, or at least Renslayer and He Who Remains probably knew, way back when, that even if you pluck these people from the sacred timeline or from their branching timelines to keep the timeline sacred, since they're all variants, whatever memory wipe technique that they're using isn't permanent, and they can regain their memories, and they still have bits and pieces of their original personality leaking through. So I'm guessing that they knew that if anything might trigger a memory of them remembering Kang in some way, that would be a bad thing. So that's why that could be a potential explanation in my mind as to why she chose to have her memory wiped as well and chose to be in a lower position and have to work her way up instead of just being given a higher level position. Because likely in the past, before all the memory wipes, while Kang was still in charge, she likely had a very high level position, even possibly being his right hand. So I'm thinking that was the structure before and the reasoning why everybody, including her memory, was wiped. But who knows? I don't know if they'll go that far into it. I don't know if all of that will be explained or just glossed over. I kind of hope it is explained, but we will see. But it does make sense that Loki and the rest of them wouldn't put it together that Miss Minutes was a part of all of this, even though it should have been clear that if Miss Minutes is a created entity, that Kang would have created that entity. And it should have been clear to them, if that's the case, then that being would be working with Kang and working to get Kang back to that same position after he was killed. Assuming he was actually killed in that scene. And he didn't just, oh, okay, I'm stabbed now, but I'm still technically alive because I have technology that can just do that. And, I'll just, when nobody's looking, revive myself somewhere and live on a farm. Thanos himself onto a farm and just, yeah, I'm gonna grow vegetables now. And we have Casey being like, oh, look, what is that? He's like, oh, I could just tell by looking at it that no, that's not what it does. It doesn't block tracking. And of course, he's read the TVA guidebook. He needs to see. He needs to sit with this device and kind of analyze it more to try to figure out what exactly it does. But they don't give it to him and be like, okay, while you're monitoring the timeline and trying to track down Ravonna, and maybe even track down Miss Minutes, don't, or on the side, you could take a look at this thing and try to figure out what it does. But they take it with them to then go interrogate X5. And all they need to find out are the three main things that they're looking for. Sylvie, the temp pad, and what they're planning. Which makes sense of the priority things they need to focus on. And this particular room, I don't think we've seen it before. When Loki was being interrogated, he was in a very different room. This is very orange. This room is very, very orange. I don't know why it's TVA color schemed orange. I can't, when I had looked at this first, I couldn't figure out what this room is actually being used for. It almost seemed like they brought in a seat just to sit him in the middle of this big room to use as interrogation room. And like I had said during season 1, it's odd that they would even have a room for interrogation, because what's the point of interrogating somebody when you're just going to destroy them and the entire branch timeline that they've created? There is no reason to ever need to interrogate anyone. Like, maybe you might want to interrogate your own soldiers if you think something's off, or if maybe they did something or mess with the timeline or whatever it might be. But for variants, even interrogating one of your own agents or a fellow agent, I don't know if they would necessarily need a proper interrogation room for something like that, or just a regular room and kind of question them. And I also don't know if they would necessarily need to lock them up, or if there was a process. Maybe there was actually a process, just like with the Eternals, that you kind of wipe their memory again and reset them. But it almost seemed like maybe that's not the case. Maybe you would just kill them, quote unquote kill them, and they'd end up at that place at the end of time. And of course he has a name now, Bradley. And that's another thing that I should mention. Casey has a name. It's not like a number or a letter or a number letter combination versus these agents like X5 or B15. But also you have somebody like Mobius having a name called Mobius. You have Ouroboros having a name called Ouroboros. Ravonna obviously has a name. It's weird that certain people in the TVA have proper names and others just have number letters, letter numbers. And then X5 starts going off, or Brad starts going off on Loki. And I think this shows a lot of growth, how Loki just like takes a deep breath and just lets him go at him. And it looks almost clear that it's not bothering Loki. It's like he has the capability now and the, I guess, mental state now. He's in a good place, or in a place where he could just deal with this. And not only he, in my mind, it seems like in this scene, Loki has already confronted himself with all of these things that X5 or Brad is telling him. Like, he's already gone over this. He's already beaten himself up over feeling like this and believing some of these things. But he's moved past that at this point. He's a changed person and a better person, I think. So I think it shows a lot of growth in him to be able to just take and accept all this and not, it seemingly it doesn't let it bother him. And even if it does to some degree bother him, he's able to deal with that. And he doesn't just immediately go off the rails. He doesn't immediately snap. Or at all. He doesn't at all snap. Or do anything. He uses it to kind of put on a show. To the point where even Mobius is almost like, is he actually going to do something? You see Mobius a little bit worried in the background of the scene as Loki's approaching Brad. And even B15 seems uncomfortable and uneasy. Is like something going to happen here? Is he going to snap? But I also like that neither of those two stepped in or did anything. And only when X5 is like, he needs therapy, then Mobius steps forward and breaks the tension. And Loki just backs off, just like that. And now it's Mobius' turn to interrogate him. And I think Mobius's offer is somewhat legit, where he might actually be willing to return Brad to the Sacred Timeline. Because technically, X5 hasn't done anything wrong. He just has answers to the questions that they need answered. And if he were to work with them and provide all of that, there would be no reason for them to keep him. They would just return him, obviously without a temp pad and without any advanced technology, and just be like, okay, you're back. Now the thing is Brad being genuine in this scene when he's saying, they took us away, they stole us, and it almost seems like he does want to go back to just being an actor on the Sacred Timeline. He wants to continue that life that was taken from him. Is he acting here, or is he being genuine that he actually wants to go back to that life? I don't know. And even up to the end of this episode, I don't actually know what his end goal is. Part of me wants to be like, okay, his mind has been opened. He just wants to have a normal life back on the Sacred Timeline and not be a TVA agent. And if that's the case, that's fine. And I think he should get that. Because I don't think he's done anything wrong yet. Or at all. He's just reinserted himself back into the Sacred Timeline. Now, one, I guess, oddity is, where is the original him from the Sacred Timeline? Because I'm pretty sure his variant was taken when it started branching off and doing something. But the original him that was supposed to be on the Sacred Timeline and be an actor and all of that should still be there, if that's the case, if that was who he originally was. You could look into this and be like, if this version of him is in the place of where the original sacred version of him should be, what has he done to that guy? Did he just kill him and take his place? Is he locked up somewhere? Is something happening? Because that just could be a whole mess all on its own. It would have made more sense if he existed on a branch timeline where the actor had gone missing and he just stepped in and was like, oh no, I'm here, I'm found, I'm good, everything's good, and just continued on living that life. But he's specifically a part of the sacred timeline. And he's mentioning that he originally was an actor. And that was his life. Unless I'm wrong about that, and he's not meant to be an actor, there is a Brad somewhere else, and this version just wants to be an actor. This variant Brad, X5. But I don't think that's the case. And he starts going off on, I stopped talking because he was smacked up across the head. But he starts going off on Mobius. And then you have Mobius just losing it on him. And then you have Loki having to step in and pull him away. Very much out of character for Mobius, it seems. Because Mobius seems like the very calm, collected, go with the flow kind of guy, as he himself has said before. But this was just out of nowhere. Clearly, he hit a nerve, or a few, with his tirade against Mobius, and trying to have Mobius confront the fact that, you know, there is a you somewhere else. You once had a life, all of that kind of stuff. Do you even know what it was? Do you want to know what it was? You're nothing. All of that kind of stuff. Clearly messed up to do that, but it definitely got to him. And then again, another amazing scene where Mobius is quite literally running from that situation and what he's just done. Because he's clearly emotional and probably embarrassed, letting his emotions get to him, letting X5 get to him. He's in a rush to get as far away from that as possible. And Loki, behind him, genuinely concerned and asking if he's okay, which is such an amazing thing to do when somebody's not okay. You're trying, if you're close to them, You want to make sure that they're okay. You want to make sure after a situation like this, you're genuinely concerned for them. And of course, Mobius deflecting, he didn't get under my skin, he got under your skin. Like, are you alright? I've never seen you like this before. I'm not judging. Again, Loki is really good in this scene. He is genuinely concerned, not trying to be judgmental, trying to figure out what's happened, if Mobius is okay. And they end up in the automat. I don't remember if we got a name for this place before. I'm pretty sure... Oh no, the place before that we seen them eating together, or at least seeing Mobius eating, and some other characters eating, was like a lounge, not a lounge, like a... What's it called? Like a cafeteria looking place. But this looks like the kitchen looking place. I don't think we've actually seen this place before. Like, I was following you. You were clearly ahead of me. Mobius having to take a breath. And I think in this moment he realized that, you know, his emotions are high. He's not in the right headspace right now. And then Loki suggesting that let's get a piece of pie. You know, sit down, calm down, eat. Perfect suggestion. The whole scene was so well done. And showing how far Loki has come and how much he's changed and the type of person he is now. I really like that about this scene. Because he is now a completely different person. He cares about other people. He basically has a family. A found family in these people. And he has a mission and a purpose, but it's not like a glorious purpose like before. He's driven by his care for people and not driven for like some kind of self-fulfillment or some kind of like greater purpose or destiny or he's owed something. He's driven for other reasons and genuinely good reasons, I think. And that's the type of character he's morphed into now. Where he has somebody that he fully trusts and cares about in Mobius. He had somebody that he trusted and cared about in Sylvie. And I think he still is greatly concerned about her and her safety and wants her to be okay, genuinely. Even if they don't end up together, even if she wants nothing to do with him, I think he genuinely still cares about her and wants her to be okay and happy. And I think with the threat of her being hunted right now, that is weighing on him a lot, and he doesn't want to see that happen. And I think he also genuinely cares about the other people, like Casey and B-15. They haven't had much interaction, and Obi as well. They haven't had much interaction yet. I'm hoping there'll be more of that. But he's become the hero of this story. And then being able to take a breath, sit down, eat, talk. And Mobius saying that it wasn't tactical. He clearly did lose his cool. He's gotten to the acceptance state of all of this, and he's willing to open up and talk to Loki. And Loki saying it's okay. It happens. Sometimes the rage builds up and you have to let it out. Loki being understanding and compassionate and trying to comfort him. And comfort him in such a way that he's willing to talk about his own personal what happened before, where he came to Earth. He was so mad at his brother and his father, he came to Earth with the Infinity Stone and, you know, tried to take over the place. Like, he's literally saying, you know, in the first Avengers movie, that he clearly lost his cool. He overreacted, and him being able to just kind of joke about this and talk about this, all in an effort to comfort Mobius and make Mobius feel better about just, smacking this guy across the head, which is so much less than what Loki clearly did in his fit of rage that, you know, it's such a sweet and nice and genuine scene of care and compassion. And I'm sure the people who shipped these two together were over the moon when this scene came out. And I absolutely adore this scene. Absolutely. It is so good. And again, it's shown growth in Loki and the type of person he is. A genuinely caring and good person. And I want this version of Loki. I so desperately want this version of Loki to not just have a good ending, but also to meet Thor. So Thor can see the real brother he's always kind of imagined and wanted and looked up to. This Loki is that Loki that I think he had seen back when they were kids. But obviously, through their upbringing and everything that happened, he ended up being warped and twisted by all of the pressure and living in somebody else's shadow and finding out that he was adopted. All of that stuff weighing on him and him just being a trickster because of it. Now, him being a trickster isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could be a genuinely good thing, and he could use it for good purposes, as we see here. And I think it would be so amazing if he reunites with Thor, this Loki reunites with that Thor, the main timeline Thor, and they actually get to resolve some of that stuff, and Thor gets to see the brother he both lost in multiple senses of the word, and maybe always imagined having. I think that would be amazing. And then Mobius not wanting to see the life he could have had. And it's the other side of finding out or being given the choice to find out for all of the TVA agents where they had originally come from and who they originally were. And I'm sure some TVA agents would feel the exact same way as Mobius does here, where he genuinely doesn't want to know because he has an entire life here, even if the basis of the life he has here and the mission he has here is because he was kidnapped and brainwashed and, his memories were all erased. This is still his life. And the fear, I guess, that he says, like Loki brings it up, like you might think twice if you get to actually see what life you had, but Mobius says it where he's like, if it was something bad, if he was like a bad guy, if it was a villain, if his life was worse off on the sacred timeline than it is here in the TVA, he could handle that. That would be fine, and that makes sense. Anybody would if they just woke up one day and were like, "Oh, I might have actually had a completely different life that I don't remember somewhere else." If you actually went and investigated that and found out, oh, it was worse than I thought, than my current life, the thing that I've built now, I'm much happier staying where I am. But the question is, how would you feel if that life was better? Because then a whole bunch of other stuff would start flooding in. It's like, can I get that back? Can I go back? Can I regain all of this? Is it too late? What if it is too late? Then what happens? Can I still try to go back? Can I still try to regain what I've lost? Can I still get that better life? What about all the people that either had lost me or don't know about me anymore, or etc., etc., etc.? So his answer is one that I completely understand, and if it were me in this situation, I'd still want to peek and find out, but I would need to be in a place mentally, I think, where I fully accept that I'd rather have the life that I have versus try to go back and regain like what Brad does, you know, whoever he once was. I think that would be my answer in this situation. I'd still want to know, but I wouldn't want to try to go back in all likelihood, unless I knew I could flawlessly go back without any repercussions and it was a better life that I had before. If I could like flawlessly reinsert myself exactly where I should be without any issues and re-remember all of the stuff that I need to know and just put myself back there, then that would be fine. But beyond that, I would need to be in a place where I'm like, okay, I'll be able to accept whatever I see and be perfectly fine with living the life that I currently live. Because in my mind, if there's no way for me to go back, then that's in and of itself a negative. So it would be like if I had seen my life was worse. So technically me trying to go back would make my life worse, therefore my life is better here, so I'd be able to more fully accept staying rather than going back. And Mobius has the issue where he's like, well, what if it's rattling around in the back of my head, you know, while I have to stay here? But it does make sense. I'm sure some TVA agents would feel the exact same way and just never want to know. And that's perfectly fine and reasonable and acceptable. You can't force somebody to just look into that and accept that or anything like that. They have to be given the choice. They have to be, you know, you can choose if you want to look into this, but you have to be ready and prepared for whatever you might see. And you have to be prepared for the decision you'll have to make if you want to go back or stay, and what it means. Like, I think they literally all need counseling to, before they make a decision like that, to even look. And then afterwards, based on whatever decision they make. And now that they work through this, trying to figure out how to get Brad to talk. And we switch over to Obi. Love the music. Love the visuals. Him just coming into here and just flipping a bunch of switches. Carrying this thing. One thing I'll say is it's weird when I see technology of any kind being spherical in nature. It almost kind of doesn't make sense. It's like you have to make this counter sphere, opposite sphere type of thing to fit something like that in. And if you need to plug something into it, you're plugging it into, you know, an odd shaped thing that isn't going to sit on a desk properly. It's a cool looking object. It's just an odd shape to be building technology off of. And I know a lot of future technology type stuff in some movies tend to be weird shaped, like spheres. Spheres are a perfectly fine shape. I have nothing against spheres. It's just an oddity that doesn't properly fit onto things, into things, that sort of thing. That makes it odd to try to create technology out of anything that's spherical in shape. Unless there's a clear function for it or a need for it to be that shape. Like, sure, it's the maximum volume with the most minimal surface area. But beyond that, is there any other functionality to it? Does it make any sense to have it roll about or have to build everything around it to have it that shape? Or can you not make it into like a cube or something that can sit on any surface really that functions easily with things? Though a sphere might be easier to carry around. And this scene is also brilliant. Yet another brilliant scene 25 minutes in, where they do this whole song and dance thing where Loki and Mobius bring in this, what almost looks like a vacuum cleaner, to be honest, an industrial vacuum cleaner. And then Loki's like, "Oh, we forgot the remote for this thing." And then Mobius goes out to go look for the remote. Loki follows behind and shuts the door, locking it. And then Lokius goes on his monologue, and you have Mobius behind that door, looking real distressed. He wrote a little script of his own. This is so brilliant. Pulls out the controller. Absolutely brilliant. Every move in this little chess match type thing that he's set up, this script, this act, is so good. This is what I mean by using mischief in a good way. Like, he's playing into the character he knows X5 or Brad believes him to be. This trickster, evil villain. And having Mobius, of course, look genuinely concerned on the outside of that door. And playing into not knowing how this device thing works. Because he knows that Brad knows that he doesn't know how to use it. Which would cause even more concern than him messing with the buttons and creating a whatever that is. It almost looks like the time doors that they open, but a solid version of that can encompass something. And of course, presses a button and encompasses Brad after crushing that chair, that poor, poor chair. And clearly, Brad is concerned. And this is for sure getting to him. This is clearly working. Him playing into just not knowing how it works, trying to mess around, trying to figure it out. But also making him think that, you know, he's perfectly comfortable if Brad gets hurt here. All of it being an act. I want to believe you, but he's such a good actor. This is just too good. And he's getting information out of him. I do want to know the answer to Loki's question. What is the penalty for a highly decorated field officer abandoning his mission? I have a feeling this has never happened in the history of the TVA. But if it has, what is the penalty? What they do? I assume they just kill them. Now it almost looks like he's crushing Brad a bit too much. And immediately Brad spills beans once he's being crushed. Absolutely brilliant. And then Mobius walks right in. A little bit of mischief. Hell of a performance. It was so good. Again, showing how well they work together. Then Casey and B-15 looking for Obi. Nice to meet you. Of course, I wrote it. And then Casey being absolutely stunned. You're Ouroboros? Absolute fanboy right here. This is such a weird situation. Because you know that Obi hasn't had visitors in like 400 years. And we need the temporal aura of He Who Remains to open this lock, or Miss Minutes to override it. Now, I wonder what actually happens when this loom fails, or explodes, or whatever's supposed to happen. Pause it here. Because they've just hopped over to where Sylvie's supposed to be. And you see a McDonald's sign. But I'm wondering what happens if it's actually catastrophic or dangerous or a bad thing for the loom to stop functioning or explode or whatever might happen to it. Clearly for the TVA, this would be a bad thing because they'd get caught up in the explosion. But if this thing is forcing raw time to be one sacred timeline, with it gone, does that mean that raw time will just randomly form timelines just out of chaos? Or will that mean that no timelines will ever be formed anymore once it's destroyed or once it breaks? Because on the one hand, it's a good thing, possibly, so that you don't have a device being controlled by the TVA that creates timelines, whether it's creating a multiverse or not. But on the other hand, if some device like this is somehow necessary to the creation of timelines, and no timelines can exist without it, then that's a huge problem, obviously. Though, if something like this is needed, then from the beginning of time it would have needed to be created. Or from the beginning of five-dimensional whatever, it would have needed to be created by someone or something. And we would need an answer, if that's the case, as to what created that. Unless when, I don't know, five-dimensional realities are formed, they're born with things like this in them to make timelines. Though I don't know if it's going to get that detailed, I don't know if any of that's going to be solved or answered. But it would be a good place to reveal that Obi might be a bad guy. Because if something like this is unnecessary to timelines existing, or if something like this is constricting the freedom of a multiverse in any way, then you could play Obi as the bad guy trying to force it to create one sacred timeline using this device. And you could play him as a bad guy from that point. But I don't want to see that happen. I don't envision that happening. I want him to be a good guy. Plain and simple. He's too nice a character. He seems too nice a character. He seems genuinely too nice a person. And now Brad's like, okay, I brought you here. A deal's a deal. Go in. We do find out why he's so jumpy. A variant who killed 400 of our co-workers. So, she did directly kill some of them, I believe. But others, I don't think were killed and were just erased and sent to the end of time, that location. So they're probably still alive. They're probably just running around there. Just like the other Lokis have survived there, they could probably survive there too. I kind of want to see who else is there. Because they could just be living there now. And as the camera goes into the McDonald's, we see Sylvie, who seems like she just has a life here now. She just works here at the exact same McDonald's that she ended up in. And I really like how it's like she has all these little stars on her name thing. So she's been like a really good worker, clearly. Now her face after seeing Loki. She absolutely cannot believe what she's seeing and who just walked in those doors. absolutely not expecting it, completely blindsided her. She's like, what do I do? I'm pretty sure in that moment where she kind of looks off to the side, she's like, do I run or do I stay here? I'm like 100% sure that's what she's thinking in that moment. But she's like, what's happening? Why are they here? How did they find me? Brilliant cue for the McDonald's worker in the background to exit, stage left. And of course, Mobius wanting some pie. And Loki sauntering up to the counter, taking a deep breath, looking about, then looking at her. Not able to maintain eye contact for too long. Obviously, this is not easy for him. Clearly, in this moment, a part of him probably wants to not have this situation happen. Another part of him probably wants to express his feelings to her and tell her how everything that played out and how it made him feel. But he completely calms down, starts off with a hi, gauges her reaction, and he's clearly trying to choose his words carefully and not upset her, get himself upset, because this is important. And she's like, her break's in 5 minutes. And he just walks out and waits. Again, brilliant scene. They walk outside. And then they start talking. And he is really trying to say the right words and not say the wrong things, I think. Because I'm sure there's a lot of emotion and raw emotion behind the face he's putting up to be able to face her and try to talk. And in his mind, he needs to put all of that stuff aside because there's something bigger that's happening and he wants her help in figuring this out because he can't do it alone. And I'm thinking he's also genuinely concerned for her safety because they don't know what's going on with those other TVA agents and what they're plotting. And they were clearly trying to go after her at some point. And that could be a problem. And her earrings, I think they're that Egyptian symbol, that life symbol, I think. And when I had seen episode 1 of season 2, I didn't know exactly if he had noticed that Sylvie was in that elevator. But clearly he did. Now that he's saying, I saw you when I hopped to the future, and you were there. And I had thought that if he had seen her, there may have been enough time for them to talk. Or for her to have said something to him, and that may have sent him on this path to go look for her on the timeline or on one of the branch timelines. But it seems like I was wrong about that, completely wrong, where he never got a chance to say anything to her in that moment, and she never got a chance to say anything to him. And now he's trying to find out what happened. And she has a life here now. She's not running. She's happy. She has no intention of going back or doing anything like that. And she says something very important and very interesting here, where he's like, I've been to the future. I saw you there. It's gonna happen. And she's like, is it gonna happen? Because that sounds like the future's written. And from my point of view, it is written. Every possible future is written and exists and can now exist. So all possible futures are written. Him seeing her there, he will see her there. She will be there. That is written. That will happen. She will end up in that situation. There is no avoiding it because every possible situation for her to end up in will happen. There'll just be a whole bunch of branches on the sacred timeline or off of the branches off of the sacred timeline. There's no reason why branches can't also branch. Unless something like the loom is stopping that from happening. And right now it's stuck being only a few branches off the sacred timeline. And it can't branch too much or too much further. And branches can't branch. But if the multiverse is properly free and all possibilities can happen right now, then she will end up there. And she will also not end up there, both simultaneously on different branches at the same time. It's just, as being part of the sacred timeline, where will she actually end up? What will actually happen? That to, I guess, this one that we're following, but technically if things are branching, which is this one? Is this one already a different one? I don't know. And I don't know if there's a way to know the answer to that question. But I don't think they'll make it that complicated. I think they'll just stick to it being a lot more simpler than that. And this one that we've been following this entire time is the one that we'll continue to follow. And that's the one that will probably end up there. Now, it does bring into question what He Who Remains had said. All of this is meant to happen, all of this will happen, as it has happened. So He Who Remains will once again end up in that same place. The question is, all the stuff that happened with Loki and Sylvie, was all of this also meant to happen? He Who Remains mentions that, he pushed all the pieces in the right places, they just had to walk down the path as they did. Everybody's a pawn to him. And everything that happens after he says, I don't know what's going to happen anymore, all of this is brand new. Is he lying or telling the truth there? If he's telling the truth, does that mean that he's toyed with reality enough to gotten to a point where he hasn't lived through these experiences yet? A new thing has occurred. But he has memories or files or something of living through other possibilities of a Loki and a Sylvie ending up at that same place and maybe possibly making a different decision or saying a different thing, etc. That's what I'm wondering. And if that's the case, then how much of what's happening now did he know is going to happen, or does he not know that any of this is going to happen? And I assume that if a He Who Remains comes forward and ends up in this position again, they will know of all of this happening. Whether it's part of their sacred timeline or it's part of a branch, they would know all the stuff that happened along that branch. Especially if they came from one of them. There's no reason to suspect that a Kang has to come from the sacred timeline or a sacred timeline. It can come from any branch, find Goliath, and conquer everything. So at that point, there doesn't really exist a sacred timeline. That's just a made-up thing after a Kang creates one. And Sylvie saying, I don't want to see what you saw in the future, I want nothing to do with that, is very similar to Mobius being like, I don't want to see what my past was like. I don't want to see who I once was. That has nothing to do with me anymore. He didn't say those words, but essentially, that's what he's feeling. That's the emotion behind it. That's what he's thinking. He wants nothing to do with that person because he's not that person. And she wants nothing to do with the future because she doesn't want to become that person. She doesn't want anything interfering or rattling around with her having to worry about that and that future and her ending up there. Because her right now doesn't ever want to be there. And then Loki saying this is bigger than TVA. This is bigger than everything. And him saying that the TVA is the only defense is interesting. Because I kind of see it growing into something like that. That's what I had wanted when I had watched season 1, and then into season 2, which I'm hoping for an ending for the TVA would be it is the line of defense against anything like a Kang trying to conquer a multiverse and keeping a multiverse free. A TVA would be perfectly positioned to transition into an organization that does that. It does not interfere unless it has to stop somebody from either conquering some random branch or timeline or all timelines or the entire multiverse. It only steps in to make sure that the multiverse gets to be free and people and all entities that live and exist along any branch, any timeline are free and get to have that freedom. And now back to X5 and Mobius. It very much is a complicated relationship and a lot to unpack. But I kind of don't think so. There's so much, I guess, kind of the same, but they're also so much different from each other that it's like there's no point in looking at them as if they're the same entity. I don't think there's any benefit in doing that. I think it's better to look at them as if they're two completely separate beings, not variants of one another, and two individuals that are very similar, and similar in ways that I think are good for each other, and that they are good for each other. Because they can understand each other in a way that, you know, in real life you would wish to find somebody that could understand you like that, or be willing to accept you and understand you like that. And another amazing line from Loki. You're just gonna give everyone free will and walk away. It's such a brilliant line, and I think that is the line that will encompass all of season 2. That is the thing that I think will be the background theme of all of season 2. You've given everybody free will and you've just walked away. Where I don't think you can do that. And I don't think the universe is forgiving enough to let you do that. Because there needs to be someone or something defending that free will. Just like with most countries on the planet in our real life, there needs to be someone or something defending that democracy. There needs to be things in place and people willing to defend that, to defend people's rights and freedoms, to live in a free society. I think Loki is absolutely right to have said that. In a similar way, you need somebody defending the freedom and keeping the multiverse free. Because if there's nobody there, then somebody can rise up and take control again. And who's there to prevent that? And what happens when that occurs? And Kang himself had said, you know, I'll return here. Forgetting the war that Kang says is going to come. That doesn't really matter. What matters is eventually one of them will return to that position, and they'll think the only way to fix it all, and the only way to keep my position and stop any war, or stop other me's from trying to kill me is by creating this one sacred timeline and eliminating all of them. And you're back to the same place that you were in the first place. You're back to that same problem. You need somebody in place to defend what you believe to be the right thing, which is the freedom of the multiverse. You want everybody to live happily and to have lives and for all the variants to exist. But they're technically not variants, they're just people on different timelines. You want all of that to exist. You want that entire multiverse to exist. The billions and the infinite beings to just have lives, to be able to live freely and peacefully, and not be worried that some organization is going to come and destroy your entire reality, and you along with it. Or kidnap you. And your entire reality gets destroyed behind you. But it's really important that he mentions this. And then in Sylvie's mind, all she's going to do is kill him if he shows up again. It's as simple as that. Any Kang shows up, she'll just kill him. And now Brad spills the beans. Everybody's gonna die. He's freaking out. And Sylvie uses her powers to see why. They're going to bomb every branch. I think I predicted this. I know I was thinking this in the previous episode. That's what they're planning. They're just gonna prune all timelines all at once to regain the sacred timeline. And that's exactly what they're doing. And then Sylvie instantly transforms back into her regular costume. I'm thinking the McDonald's costume was just an illusion, in all likelihood. And then X5 is sent back. B-15 seems to be pseudo in charge right now. And now we're seeing all of the agents are putting the charges, and it looks like they're setting off charges. Instead of... because it almost seems like they were going to plant the charges, and then the control system was going to just destroy them all instantly. But it seems like, no, they just started destroying them already. And they can't stop this from the TVA, from the main headquarter console system. There's too many of them. And they're doing everything in their power to prune all of them right now. Really cool fight scenes. And then awesome scene where the three of them emerge from their respective battles. And then Sylvie reaches out her hand, and don't overthink it. And then they hold hands to increase their power. And just basically stop everybody all at once. And it looks like the other TVA agents now hop in and arrest these TVA agents that have gone rogue. Some of them did escape, and I'm thinking that in a future episode we'll get to see more of those escaped agents. Probably still attempting to carry out more missions. Potentially. We also have a scene of Sylvie sitting kind of in the background on one of those weapon cases. And I think it's dawning on her that it isn't as simple or as easy to just be like, I freed everything, I'm walking away from all of this. Where you have other parties that exist that are gonna be actively working to undo what you have done. Now, the TVA, like, this should have been on her mind, but I guess she just wanted to be done with all of it and move on. But she should have known that at least some people within the TVA would have wanted to put things back the way that they were and would have rejected this change of a free multiverse. And maybe she didn't think that they would act in this way, or maybe she didn't want to think about any of what could have happened, the negative fallouts from the TVA, or maybe she thought that the TVA would just stop being able to function because of all the chaos. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And again, like Loki said, he just gave everybody freedom and then walked away. Loki seems to be taking the position where you need to stay and fight for that freedom and defend it. And Loki looking back to make sure she's okay, but then also moving forward, I think is a really good scene, showing that, you know, his care is genuine towards helping the multiverse be free. Like, it's clear that he agreed with her. Having a one dictator guy wasn't the right solution. But also just walking away after killing that dictator and freeing everybody isn't the right solution either. Because you need to defend the now free multiverse. And then last minute Sylvie walks through. And you have all these TVA agents. You see a few background people that I don't think really matter, but the main people are all here, standing in very good positions for you to clearly see all of them. For Obi, Casey, B-15, Mobius, Loki walking in, and then the shock on all their faces, seeing the destruction that was caused. Especially B-15. And then you get to cut to Sylvie's face. And Moby, and Loki. And Casey. And Casey got a hit. Found Ravonna. On one of the branches, it looks like. I'm assuming one of the branches that hasn't just been destroyed. Then Loki walking over to Sylvie. And her crossing her arms, of course. Saying, "Is this the best you lot can do?" And it is clear there was nothing that they could do. And Sylvie is absolutely right. The TVA is broken and is rotten. But I think it's also necessary. Because who else or what else is going to defend the multiverse? And then Sylvie walks away saying she's going home. Loki tried to get out his sentence, saying it's harder to stay. And again, yet another absolutely brilliant line. And I think this theme can be summed up, or can be used in multiple places within the Loki series. From He Who Remains, it being harder for him to have stayed. For Loki himself, it would have been harder for him to have stayed back before he even went to New York to try to conquer the Earth or Midgard or whatever. Clearly, he has done some self-reflection and has come to the conclusion that in every situation he's been running, and he's been running from all of the trauma and the stuff in his past that he would have needed to deal with and face, that he should have faced, and the stuff that was preventing him from becoming a better version of himself, or a better person, or the him that he probably wanted to be. And I think that him saying this to Sylvie now is him seeing himself in her and the negative stuff of him always running away. And running away from facing the harder choice and the harder path and walking down that harder path. And it's absolutely clear, I think, that she did basically complete her mission and then ran away from everything else. No consequences, no fallout, just do what the mission was, and now I'm done, I'm relieved, it's over, I've succeeded, and I'm gone. I'm not gonna stick around to for He Who Remains to be proven right. Where, like, He Who Remains had said, you know, there's only two options. I'll return here, or you'll have to take over and basically do what I've been doing. And she's like, absolutely not. I'm not gonna be doing what you've done. I want people to be free so that what happened to me doesn't happen to somebody else. And she's absolutely right. But she also it almost seems like, and you see this near the end of the episode where she has the He Who Remains what looks like a watch. Essentially what looks like a watch, but it's his tempad watch. I'm wondering if she's been keeping an eye on that place at the end of time to make sure nobody ends up there or tries to conquer again, or she's been keeping an eye on other timelines, but I don't think so. She's clearly not been keeping an eye on the TVA, because then she would have known all of this was happening, and maybe she would have stepped in, maybe she wouldn't have. It seems clear that she doesn't want to fight anymore, that she's been forced to have to fight and run her entire life, and the mission was all encompassing, and she couldn't rest or have happiness or have freedom or anything like that. And in the end, her mission was a good mission. She was fighting for the benefit of infinite lives across infinite possible realities that just get destroyed the moment they bubble up. So her mission and what she was doing was good in my mind. And I think nobody would argue against that. I'm sure some people online would argue against that, but that doesn't matter. Uh, but the walking away, or what seems like she's running away from dealing with the consequences of freeing the multiverse, it does seem like she's doing that, and she did that. But I don't think she can be blamed for doing something like that. I don't think it should be necessarily her responsibility. Just because she freed the multiverse, it shouldn't then automatically be her responsibility to kind of watch over it and protect its freedom. But there does need to be somebody there to protect it. Now, her saying that if He Who Remains, if Kang returns, she'll just kill him. I'm guessing that she'll just be on guard constantly. It almost seems wrong for her to have to do that as well. It seems like it should be the TVA's job to be able to protect all of, and that's kind of where I want it to go, for it to be the TVA's job to protect all of that. But in this scene, I think it's a little bit different, where she walks away and Loki is trying to say that it's harder to stay. I think that after she has seen all that has happened, and after he has kind of shown her that he's willing to stay back and willing to fight with everything he has to protect the multiverse and what she has just done, to, you know, protect the freedom that she fought so hard for, and then her turning her back after seeing all of that, I think that's what probably stung him a lot. But I also think part of him wants her to be free and to be happy, because she shouldn't be bound by this decision. She shouldn't be bound by... She's quite literally a hero in what she has done, in freeing infinite lives to be able to live their lives. And she shouldn't be bound to have to use the rest of her life to fight for keeping them all free. She shouldn't have to do that. She should be free to choose whatever she wants to do, live however she wants to live. But I think Loki had kind of hoped that she would stay and fight alongside him for this after seeing all of that. But she made her decision, and I think Loki is perfectly fine with that and is willing to accept that, and he will be willing going forward, I believe. Especially in this scene where you see Loki and Mobius, as the camera zooms in and Loki puts his hand on Mobius' shoulder, that Loki is absolutely determined to protect this freedom and make sure that she is also free and she gets to live the life that she wants to live. Because I believe that Loki didn't think that there's necessarily a place for him to ever return to, and not necessarily want to return to anywhere. And this is now his home, this is now his mission, this is his family. And he wants to make sure that what happened to Sylvie and what happened to him and what happened to all of these TVA agents doesn't happen again to anyone. And I think that will be his mission going forward. But again, I don't think it's the same type of glorious purpose that he was chasing before. And I don't think in his mind it is any sort of glorious purpose. It's not framed that way anymore. And at the end you see Sylvie lying on her car. I believe it's her vehicle. And I think she's deciding here. I think she's contemplating what she wants to do now. I think she just needed that space and the time to sit down or lie down and actually think about, you know, what does she want? Knowing all that she knows now, seeing all the things that are happening, you know, what does she actually want? What does she truly want to do? Does she want to continue living this life? Is she truly happy doing this? Does she want to go help Loki? Does she want to go somewhere else? I think she's deciding now what her future will hold, what she will plan to do. And I think in the next episode we'll see her again. She'll probably choose to join them, or she'll choose to go somewhere else and then they'll meet up again. But I'm thinking she has a few things to think about, including He Who Remains reappearing. And the next episode, I think it's clearly set up where they're going to go after Ravonna, and they're going to very likely find her, like in the trailer. In the trailer, I believe we see her, but in the trailer we see a variant of Kang, and he's doing some snake oil thing. Either he's a snake oil salesman or a magician or something. He's doing something like that. And we see Loki and Mobius show up. And I'm wondering if... I'm betting that in the next episode, they'll go after Ravonna and end up finding him. And Ravonna's actually there in the background, trying to guide this one Kang secretly to becoming He Who Remains. And that's the mission she was given. She's meant to guide Kang to becoming that. And work with him to get him there. And I'm thinking that that's when we encounter not only Miss Minutes and Ravonna, but also that variant of Kang, and then Sylvie will show up here as well. Either as part of the team, but it didn't look like that from the ending of from the trailer. I think it was in the trailer and it was also in the ending of Quantumania. It didn't look like she was with them. Though either she'll just end up there on her own, trying to investigate or figure out stuff, and ensure that Kang never ends up as He Who Remains. So I think that is what's going to be the next episode. All of that will come to fruition. And then I believe in the trailer or something like that, we see Miss Minutes becoming huge and, I don't know, stomping through a town, or down an alleyway, or down a street. I'm thinking all of that's next episode. I'm thinking everything we've seen in the trailer and in the end of Quantumania, in the post-credit, is going to be the first 4 episodes. So that all of the people who got to see the episodes early, in the early screening of the Loki episodes, they only get to see all of the stuff that has already been revealed, and even they would not know or be able to predict from the trailers or from the episodes what will happen in the final 2 episodes. I'm thinking it's set up in that way. But again, we will see. We will see how this goes, where this will go. Again, I kind of see a good ending for all of the characters to be the main characters staying behind in the TVA and rebuilding it. Maybe including Sylvie, unless she wants to have a happy life somewhere else, which would be perfect, and I would be all for that. Same with Loki, but I see Loki, Mobius, Obi, Casey, maybe not Casey, I don't know, B-15 choosing to stay behind. Well, not really stay behind, choosing to continue the TVA, but make it into something better. And make it into a proper defense to defend the freedom of the multiverse and all the people within it, and to keep the multiverse free. That's kind of what I see happening. But if that's the case, and if that's how they plan to end this season, then I don't know how they'll resolve that ending with the rest of the saga for the multiverse, and with Kang being a character who will eventually try to end up in that position again. Especially if they don't plan to do another season of Loki, or bring Loki and those characters to the big screen, and be a part of one of the major movies or multiple of the major movies dealing with the timelines and with the multiverse. Again, I know that there's supposed to be some kind of TVA thing to do with the Deadpool movie, as has been, I guess, kind of leaked or predicted, or I don't know. Whether that's actually true or not, I have no idea. But if that's the case, it would also be really interesting with the whole Deadpool kills the multiverse, or whatever that comic series was about. Especially if, like, I could see it being played in such a way, and this is just a fantastical idea, and I can't remember if I had mentioned this before, but Kang recruiting Deadpool and making Deadpool into the variant of Deadpool that goes around and just starts slaughtering the multiverse as a distraction, him ascending to becoming He Who Remains. I almost kind of want to see that happening, and the Deadpool that we've been following from the first movie and the second movie, the Deadpool movies, that Deadpool going on a mission to stop a variant of Deadpool, and him teaming up with one of the variants of Wolverine from the original X-Men series. And then I really hope in that movie that we get to see Xavier again, the original, and maybe even some of the actors that played in the reboot of all of the X-Men. It would be kind of cool. And I'm really looking forward to the future X-Men movie when they actually revamp that series. In my mind, it's really hard to have somebody else play Wolverine, because Hugh Jackman is 100% Wolverine in my mind, and in the minds of probably everybody. Quite literally, probably everybody. But it will be interesting to see if he is recast, or if, and what they do with his character, if they do anything. And same with all the other characters, if they're all recast, if they use some of the actors that were a part of Fox that did the reboot series, if any of the original actors might make cameos in it or not. But I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that. I really enjoyed all of the X-Men movies that I've seen, even the very last one. So it will be interesting to see all the fans of the original X-Men stuff and how they react, and see my own reaction to whenever the new X-Men movie will come out, and how they use the X-Men characters in future projects. And I am kind of glad that it's all under the same umbrella. Sure, it's more another step towards a company being, you know, what's it called? Oh, now my brain is stupid. Being a monopoly and owning pretty much every IP. And that's, I guess, kind of the goal of all the biggest studios, to own as many IP as possible, to own as many series, as many of the characters as they can in anything that they can. I'm sure if Disney were able to just buy out everything, I think they just would. But I'm glad there are laws preventing that. But I also like the ability for a company to be able to have, like, if it's Marvel, have all of the Marvel characters and be able to play with them. But anyways, I'll just end it here for now, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode of Loki. And I've absolutely loved every episode that's come out so far. Both episodes for season 2 and all of the episodes for season 1. This will continue to remain the number one thing in my mind, the Loki series, not only in terms of Marvel TV shows, but also including all of the movies. I think this is just number one in my mind. And I will end it here.